So, hey everyone, I've arranged for my sewing machine to be set up with the camera and wanted you to see that the next step after you've done your cutting is that we're going to go for the sewing part. So if you're following along in the sheet that you received when you picked up your kit or when it was mailed to you, is we're going to be making these two 4-patch squares. Now you're going to make 16, so we need to get started. First of all, I want to explain to you about a 1/4-inch foot, which is this foot right here. You can tell that it has a little lip on it right here. You can see that, and that's so that when you are sewing, let's get the thread away from it. When you are sewing, your fabric is going to ride up against the edge of that foot. So when I'm sewing, you can see that that edge of that foot is going to ride up against the edge of the fabric. It's called a 1/4-inch foot, and that's how you get an accurate 1/4-inch seam. Now, I do have this machine here that is a snap-on feet, so I don't have to worry about having to unscrew anything or change the ankle out or anything other than just slide them under and snap them down. So it tells you to sew the 4-patch together. So the first two that I'm going to get, and I'm going to sew them in the order that the picture shows, and I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch along this edge so that when I open it up, it is going the correct way. When you place your foot down, I've put my foot down a lot of times in my life, especially with my kids. Anyway, sorry. When I sew, and it's hard to do with a camera in between me and the sewing machine, but I'm going to give it my best shot, as I am going to sew that, and I'm actually going to sew off the edge. It's called chain stitching, and the next two that I'm going to get are this one and the green one, and I'm going to put those two together, and I'm going to sew using a 1/4-inch seam. So you see how I'm sliding that up against that little metal piece. And you can see right here where I'm guiding that. Okay, if I want to keep going, I'm going to do the next square, which is the blue and the green that go together. I'm going to put the edges together. I may have to put my glasses on. I never thought I would be a videographer doing this, but here we are. I want you to understand how to put this quilt together because it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Okay, so I've sewn that, and then the last one that I'm going to sew will be the green and the blue. And I'm going to sew those edges together. And like I said, this is called a, we're doing some chain stitching here. Okay, and then when I'm finished, I'm going to sew off the edge. If you're fortunate enough to have a machine, you can see these look like little kites all sewn together. If you're fortunate enough to have a trimmer, then I just touched the button and it trimmed and cut my thread without me having to get my scissors. So the next thing I'm going to do is I just take my seam ripper and I cut these apart where I chain them together. Okay, so now they're all separated. And my first one was the blue and the mingled, and they have names. And it always says to press to the dark side. So I'm going to press, when I go over to the ironing board, I'm just going to finger press these so you can see how these go together. Okay, I'm just finger pressing. So there's the blue and this, I think it's called, I'll tell you here in just a second, shimmer, purple shimmer. So I'm going to open those just and finger press them. And then I'm going to get the other one which is sewn to the green. And you see that I'm on my way to having the first 4 patch, which is diagram 1, and you're going to make 16 of these. Now it says to press to the dark side, so I have pressed that seam to the dark side, and now I'm going to finger press this seam to the dark side. Now the reason for that is when you put this on top of this, it's called nesting. So I am nesting. If I get the threads out of the way, you might be able to see this better. Do you see how these two go opposite directions? So when I sew these together, they are actually nested into each other. Okay, so when I sew this last 1/4 inch seam to get my 4 patch, and I'm using that 1/4 inch foot steel, and what this does is when you sew this way, it pushes this one into the underneath one, and so you wind up. Now you see I haven't had to pin anything. Trim, lift, and I want you to see the magic of what just happened. There are people who spend quite a bit of time trying to get those to line up perfectly. It doesn't get better than that, ladies. So you see, by turning my seams the correct way, meaning this one gets pushed down into this one. Do you see how they're nested into each other? Right here, they're nested into each other, and that's why you want to pay attention to the instructions and sew the dark, or press to the dark side. So you're going to go make 16 of these. Then, sorry if I'm moving the camera, then you're going to take the next one, which is the blue and the green. The blue and the green. And to me, the blue is a little darker. The values are very similar, but I'm going to press to the dark side, which is the blue, and then I'm going to press or open up and finger press. Now you can go over to the ironing board. It's just I'm trying to save time and get this video together for you. So to nest this one, see that one's turned that way. This one's going to be turned this way, which is still pressed to the dark side. So now you can see how, So now you can see how I am nesting those. And when you slide them into each other to nest them, you can actually feel them go together. You can feel them match up. And then make sure that it's a straight edge over here so you can sew. And then use your 1/4 inch foot. And it's going to nest into itself or into the other layer. Okay, so just line everything up. Now the magic of this is, everybody thinks, oh, you're such a great seamstress. Your seams always match up. It's because I learned the value of nesting. So now, look at that, folks. That's pretty awesome. Now, when you get little threads, don't cut them off too close at this point. So we'll trim some things later on. So you're going to make 16 of these, and you're going to make 16 of these, and you're well on your way to having your 4 patches done. So now we're going to take our purple 2-inch squares, and I suggest that you go ahead and do some marking all at once instead of marking and sewing and marking and sewing. I'm going to take the stack of these, and this is where I want to introduce you to the Quilter's Magic Wand. I'll turn it so you can see it. And we do have these in stock. So if you want one or need one or love to add tools to your tool chest for sewing, it's called Quilter's Magic Wand. And I love this because it gives me a straight edge. It's not a big ruler that I have to deal with. And I'm going to line it up from point to point. And again, it's very difficult for me to do this with the camera, but I'm going to give it my best shot. And you're going to mark from one point to the other, just like this. You're going to do all of your purple squares in this fashion because you've got to make 16 of these as well, because you've got 4 blocks to do. Now I'm using a friction pin, which goes away with heat. So when I iron it, it's going to go away. You could also use a water soluble. You could use any type of marking pin. I just prefer the ones that go away. But this is called a friction pin, F-R-I-X. Well, where'd it go? I saw it. There it is, F-R-I-X-O-I-O-N or O-I-O-N, yes. Okay, so that's what I'm using, and you want to use a color that you can see. So make sure you have marking pens available. You could even use dressmaker's chalk pencils, just anything so that you can see what it is that you're doing. Once you have your lines on your fabric, then you're going to pick up the coordinating fabrics like they say to do, and I'm going to have to tilt my camera just a little bit so we can go back to the sewing. And I'm going to lay this piece of fabric, and that's why the key was so important. And I know some of you couldn't understand why that I wanted to change fabrics. You can't always find the fabrics that you want, especially if you're sewing older patterns. And some of you like to use your own fabrics anyway. So I am going to lay the light purple with the diagonal going from the center of the 3.5 inch rectangle to the corner. I'm going to change my foot, and I'm going to put, and I love this foot because it's clear on the front and I can see what it is I'm doing, and you see how easy it is to change out. And what I'm going to do now is sew. I'm going to sew on the line. So line that up. You see there's a little mark in the center of the presser foot. Now, if you need to go slow, go slow. I'd rather have accuracy than just slap this quilt together. You're going to be much more pleased if you go slow and be accurate with it. So I'm going to trim this, and you can see by sewing on the line that what I'm doing is creating this upper corner in a different color. So when I'm finished with this one, I'm going to take my scissors, and I'll tell you that I love these scissors. They're awesome. They're Kai 7230s. They make a, I think it's a 5170, which is a little bit less expensive scissor. This is about $100 pair of scissors. The other model is a little cheaper, so if you're not serious about this and you're just getting started, you may start with a little less expensive scissor, but the Kai scissor is an absolutely wonderful scissor. Okay, so now I'm going to finger press, and again, I am the creator of the wool pressing mat, so I am a big fan of pressing correctly. But for the purpose of this video, I'm trying to save some time, so I am just finger pressing. So the next thing I'm going to do is get the other square that I put a line through, and I'm going to line it up. Now it's important that you finger press this part open because you're going to sew across that. So if that's closed up, you can't do it correctly. So I'm going to sew now from this line, and again you see that my presser foot has a line down the center of it so that I can tell if I'm sewing on the line or not. And if you keep your edges straight, there's no need for pinning. And I'm going to sew to the other corner. So you see how important it was to mark down the center. I'm going to take and cut that down to 1/4 inch seam. Whoops, sorry. And then I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to finger press this. And I do expect you to go over to the ironing board and press correctly, okay? And you see what's really awesome about this is I have my 1/4 inch seam that's going to go from here to here. So I won't be cutting off any of my point because I've got this sewn exactly like the instructions wanted it to be sewn. So you're going to make 16 of these. Okay, you're going to make 16 of these. And then you're going to go to the next fabric, which is the green. And we're going to do the same thing, except we're going to use the green and the dark purple. And this is why it's important that you do all your marking ahead of time so that you can just sit and sew, because now I have to take my pen and I have to, again, using the magic wand. I love that name. I wish I had a magic wand for a lot of things. Okay, so I'm going to line this up from point to point, and I'm going to draw a straight line. On the next one, from point to point, and I'm going to draw that straight line. I'm going to put that pin up, and I'm going to get the green. Oh, here it is. So we'll go back, we'll turn the camera back up. Hopefully by the next video I'll have my daughter, who is so wonderful at filming this. She'll make me look better. She had a beautiful little baby girl. It'll be 2 weeks tomorrow morning, and we're so excited to have little Ruby in our world. So again, we're going to place this on the line, and we're going to stitch. Now, if you have a speed regulator on your sewing machine, I encourage you to use that. But please, please, please sew on the line. You know, a little bit of variance isn't going to kill you, but it's not the best thing in the world to do. All right, so you see now how we've got, oh, look at this purple and green together. I want you to finger press that open. Okay, and then we're going to cut with our wonderful Kai scissors. And what I like about the Kais is the fact that they cut all the way to the point. Did you see that? Let's do that again. Look at that. It just cuts all the way to the point. Okay, so I've now got the purple and the green together. I'm going to take my second one, and it always goes from center down. If you try to sew it this way, you're going to have a really strange looking block for this quilt. So it has to go this way, from the center to the bottom right corner. If you've cut correctly, then your edges are going to line up so that you can put them straight. You're going to put your presser foot down. Difficulty there, but now you can see I'm able to sew on the line. I have my corners matched up, and I'm sewing on the line. When you're finished, you can trim. Again, you see I have a perfect 1/4 inch from there to there. I'm going to finger press this open. I'm going to trim it with the scissors. Oops. Press this open. Now I'm using white thread so you can see it. I wouldn't normally use white thread on these beautiful colors, but I did want you to be able to see the stitching. Okay, so now I have got these sewn together. You can see that this piece is going to go with this piece. In the book they have it pictured this way. So the next move I'm going to make, if I can get that under there so you can see the whole square, is this is what your square is shaping up to look like. So the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to sew, and I do recommend that you do this square and make sure that you press it open. I press so that it looks like this, so that my seams are going again on this particular one to the outside. So they're going to go to the outside on both of these. And I'm going to put the raw edges together. And I'm going to stitch. Now, it's important to use your 1/4 inch foot. So we'll go back to that, and you can see why we like the snap-on feet. And I do recommend that you press these. This is just the sample that I'm making for the class, and I'm not ironing on the pressing mat. So it's going to give me a little bit of variance, but you should always press. And you can tell it's late at night, but I want you guys to get this info, so bear with me. It's not picture perfect, but you're getting the idea of how I want this to be assembled, or how the instructor of the book wants to be assembled. Okay, so now I'm going to open this up, and you can see here, see how wonderfully that seam is together. I missed it a little bit down here, but that's because I've got a camera, but I'm actually sewing looking through this camera. So I'm off just a hair here. Most of you are going, you got to be kidding me. So anyway, I'm going to go to the pressing mat now, and I'm going to press this all open. It's just beautiful. I love the colors. So you're going to make 16 of these. So have fun. We're going to get through this. You guys are going to learn a ton. And now you can see that you have the first row and how we're putting this together. So you see here, we've got this one, which is going to be sewn like this. Sorry. So this will be your first one. You can see that one there. That's your first one. My actual sewn samples are bigger than the picture. And then we've got this one, which is the next one that's going to go up against this one. And then last but not least, for the top row, we have this one. And that's why the layouts are important, because you want to put them together exactly like they are shown here. Exactly. The purple goes on the top, the dark purple and green go on the bottom. The blue goes to the top right square. So it will look like this, this, and this. Okay? I hope you guys can get this first row together. And if you do, I'm really proud of you, because you've made a great accomplishment. The next row is going to be the same, but with a different layout. So once you've sewn these together, you're going to pull from those 16 that you've made, and you're just going to lay them out differently. So on the second row, it's going to go this way. Then the blue and the green in the middle like this, and then over to the far right, it'll be another one of these turned with the light purple on the outside. So once you've got these 16 of each of these done, it's just a matter of how you lay them out. And when you're finished, you're going to have 4 completed blocks that will look exactly like this layout. Once you have them all sewn together using the methods that we've just done for the top row, you'll see these little arrows indicating here that you're going to press those seams that way and that way. You're going to press this seam down, this seam up. That's what the little arrows are for, so you understand which way you're pressing your seams. When you're finished with this entire square, and that's what I was referring to in her book, she says that it is a 9-inch finished square. And I will pull from the first video that I did, and I want to make sure that you understand that the trimmed square is going to measure 9.5. The finished square is going to measure 9 inches, and that's after it's sewn together. The Tucker trimmer is the next thing that I want to show you so that you can be sure that your squares as you go are measuring what they need to be. So I'll go grab that and we'll look at the Tucker trimmer. So now we have arrived at the Tucker trimmer part of this. A lot of people will just measure with a ruler and cut them, but I want you to understand a little bit more about having good tools, and that is you can see through this pamphlet that this lady has really thought this through, and the reason she gets such accurate blocks is because of this tool. So it's called the Tucker trimmer, and there's the larger one for the bigger squares as well. This one measures 6.5, it cuts to 6.5, I think. So this is the small version. There's only 2, this one and then the larger one, I think, that goes to 13 inches. So what the Tucker trimmer does, you can see that on one side it's in 1/2 inch, and on the other end it's in inches. So because this square is supposed to measure 3.5, I'm going to lay this Tucker trimmer so that my diagonal line is going from this point to this point. And if I have done everything correctly, then this line will intersect exactly in the middle. You can also see that the lines here indicate that I'm straight. And you all saw I was doing this with a camera between me and my sewing machine. So we're going to trim this down now. And to do that, I'm going to have to grab my rotary cutter, and I can't overemphasize here having a sharp blade. Do not try to hack with a rotary blade. So making sure that my line is through to the points and that the lines intersect here, and it's not a lot, but I'm going to trim off that much. And I don't know if I can get my hands around this camera setup. And I'm going to do the other side too. Okay, so I didn't trim off a lot, but it makes a huge difference. Then I'm going to rotate this around because I have my 3.5. Do you see how nice and straight this is? And how perfect that is? This goes through the center, and it goes from corner to corner. I'm going to trim that off. And I'm going to trim that off. So when all is said and done, I have a perfect 3.5 inch block. You're going to do the same with this one, the same with this one. You're going to sew them together like we mentioned earlier, where the pink is out here, the blue goes to the top corner, and the green oh, sorry, I sewed the wrong two together. Anyway, these are going to go this way, and then you'll take another one of your 16 and go over here. So you'll have this one, and this one. This one is going to go in the middle as you start building it. So the goal is to make 16 of each one of these. You're going to trim them with your Tucker trimmer, and when you're finished, this is what you're going to have. And sorry, I can't get the whole square in the shot here, but you see how this is going to be sewn together. Blues go in the corners. Your light purple will be facing that way. So this is the first row, this is the second row, and this is the third row. You're going to have 4 of these. So 1, 2, 3, and my 4th one's floating around from where I showed it to a customer today. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope this has helped. It's going to be a beautiful quilt when we're finished. And the sooner you pick up these little tidbits of information, I think the happier you're going to be with your end results. So thanks for joining me. Sorry it's a little late, but I had a granddaughter to arrive, so we'll be better on schedule with the next video for the second month. So thanks for joining me.